Thanks for having me here. I'm Troy D'Ambrosio, and if you would have asked my junior high vice principal, whose office I spent a lot of time in, whether I was going to be here or in jail, you would have won a lot of money if you would have bet here. So it's really a pleasure to be here and have a chance to talk with you. So I'm going to talk about everybody's favorite subject, which is innovation. And we hear a lot about that, and it's one of those things when people talk about it make me groan, because you hear all of those things about it. And for me, innovation has been somewhat like trying to learn a foreign language. It's not something I'm comfortable with. It's not something I'm good at. But it is something that I know I need, because I know someday I'm going to be in a foreign country and I'm going to be lost and I'm going to need to be able to ask for directions, right? So part of the reason I've always felt uncomfortable with innovation, it's not what I've done naturally and historically, even though I have kind of an interesting diverse background, and I worked in the mayor's office in Salt Lake City. I was his chief of staff. I worked for a big Fortune 500 company for a number of years, doing investor and government relations, reporting to the CEO there. Then I jumped and did two startup companies, one in the telecom business in the US and one in telecom in Latin America. And you would think with that kind of background that innovation would come natural, but that's not innovation in an organization. That's just taking entrepreneurial ideas and selling them up. So a few years ago, I came up to the University of Utah in 2002, and started an entrepreneurship program up there. And we started doing some things. It was a greenfield. There wasn't an organization. So had pretty much what I wanted to do. And one of the things along the way, I helped one of the organizations at the university commercialize some technology. Very successful group at the U, but they saw technology change coming along, and so they wanted to put together a task force around innovation. They invited me to be there and plan around it, and so a bunch of us sat around. We spent a bunch of time planning what innovation would look like and kind of some plans. That the organization funded some money around it. And then 18 months later, I heard this organization had been disbanded, that most of the people that were in the innovation process had left the organization, left the university. It was really a disaster. And so I kind of was very tainted about the kind of idea of innovating. And so 10 years running an entrepreneurship program at the University of Utah. We've become pretty successful. We had a retreat with the university leadership, with our donors, and we talked about what we'd done, kind of like pat myself on the back and stuff, and then at the end of it, it was kind of like, what do we do next? And leadership of the University of Utah, the president at the time said, Troy, you're engaging some students, but you're only engaging a small number of them. I've got 33,000 students. What are you going to do to engage? You know, you're touching 2,000 of them, but what are you going to do to get the other involved with you? My donor said, yeah, how are we going to be not just good, but great? How are we going to be one of the best in the world at what we're doing? And so I realized that I was now being challenged to innovate, and I was frankly terrified, right? I was like, what am I going to do? And so we did some things, and this was the result. Right, so this is the number of students that we had engaged with us, and we put together a plan and created an innovation, and we had this dramatic result. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that and kind of where I've gone with that. But what I want to say is that this innovation was really three things. First, we created some unique space. We really thought through that space differently than other people had. We thought about how to engage students, and we really flipped it on the head and said, how do we engage students differently, and did some really different things there. And finally, we created a separate and unique financial model that this is sustainable up there at the University of Utah, and really thought out of the norm of how universities finance programs and things. So this is the result we had with it. And so we've become recognized as for this innovation among universities and among economic development professionals and among municipalities, government entities. And I've had over 500 universities and entities come through and tour the Lassonde studios with me and talk about what we're doing. And you know, we go through it, I take them through a tour, I get very detailed about what we're doing and how we're doing it. And generally at the end of the meeting, almost 10 out of 10 times, they'll say to me, well, we could never do that in our organization. We could never do that on our campus. We could never do that in our city. And then it's followed by excuses, right? It's like, it's not our culture. We don't have the resources. We don't have the institutional will. And so I've become very much in the habit of, great, that makes me feel really good because I don't feel like I'm going to have any competition in this, right? So not too long ago, I had the chief innovation officer of one of the most prestigious, largest healthcare centers in the world reach out to me. And he said, Troy, I'd like to come and visit you. We're going to spend $3 to $4 billion on innovating healthcare over the next decade. And we've been looking at places that have done something different and have changed and had an impact on our organization. And we'd like to fly a team out to Salt Lake City and spend the day with you at the Lassonde Entrepreneur Institute. I'm thinking, well, this is pretty cool, right? So this is great. So they come out, I run them through the same kind of program that I've done with these other institutions. And at the end of it, he asked for an hour to kind of do Q&A with me. And so he sits down and he says, I've got a couple of questions for you. And I'm thinking, okay, great. Usually we talk about why did you build the building this way or what did you do here? But he talks about some very strategic high-level questions. So he asked me 4 questions. He said, why did you innovate? How did you come up with the innovation? Why was it successful? And how did you get it done in a university? And I was absolutely stumped. Those questions had never been asked that directly to me. And I was just kind of like sitting there like a deer in the headlights, a little bit like now with these lights on me. I'm like, what am I going to say? So I kind of stumbled through some answers and gave them to him. And I realized I had never stepped back and thought about how did that innovation take place, right? What did I really do? So I want to kind of answer those questions for you today. So let's start with that first question. And so why did we innovate? Well, I mentioned that we had been around for 10 years. We got to a top 10 program, and I was challenged by my organization to step up and really do something, right? And so if you think about the way innovation takes place, a lot of it is taking place out of you're reacting to a threat. So that first group I mentioned, that the innovation process that failed, they were reacting out of fear that they were going to lose their market, right? And they tried to create an internal process that was going to cannibalize their own business and do that, and it failed. Here, and what we had happening is we had something good and we wanted to make it great. And so it came out of some very positive things. So that was the motivation for us. So if you think about things that cause innovation, might be a crisis, it might be an external threat, but many times it's an internal decision to let's do something different. And about the time we were doing this, I was reading Steve Jobs' biography, and you read about how he was very willing to change and cannibalize his own products. Even though he had something great, he wanted to make the next great thing. And so really read a lot about that, read things about what that he was doing. And so when we thought about why change, that's really what we wanted to go from good to great. We wanted to do something different. So the next thing was, how did we come up with the idea? And to some of that, it was pretty straightforward things that you would normally do. We looked at what we were doing, but what we did differently, I think, is we looked at what we were doing from the perspective of our clients, our students, and how we were engaging with them. And I interviewed maybe 500 students that had participated with us, but more importantly, I interviewed an equal number of students who didn't participate with us. Why weren't you engaging with us? So one of the things, I gained some incredible insight and realized, man, how bad are we missing the boat with you, right? I mean, we really were missing how we were engaging with students and how we were dealing with them. And we learned a phenomenal amount about that. So we really talked to our customers. Then the next thing we did was we mapped out where we wanted to go. What things did we want to accomplish by changing? We want to get more students engaged. We want to get a diverse set of students engaged. We want to have greater impact on what they were doing. So we had a pretty good roadmap of that. The next thing we did was benchmark other top high-quality programs in the country, right? And I think that was the most insightful thing of that is we talked to our students, we looked at, we had a roadmap where we were going, then we benchmarked against other organizations. And what we learned from doing that is if we just did what those take the best practices, what you normally would do, and iterate on them, we were not going to achieve what our students wanted from us, and we were not going to achieve where we wanted to go. So that forced us to really think entirely differently about what we're going. And that was the thing that forced us most, was those kind of things coming together. And then once we got there, the final thing we did was look internally at what the friction points were going to be in our organization to getting something done. And I mentioned I have a background. I worked as a chief of staff of the mayor of Salt Lake. I'd been in the university for a while. I understood the organization pretty well about how we were going to do it. So that's how we came up with what we did. Then we looked back and said, okay, why were we successful? Well, we were successful, I think, because we had a pretty good, clear set of goals and processes and things that we wanted to do. So we were pretty successful there. we were successful in that we developed a financial plan that made us viable within our organization. That was a really critical part, was we came up with a very detailed financial plan and said, we're going to go take some risk. So we built a $45 million building that had never been built before, that was entirely new, and said we were going to fill it up with students and put them in a lifestyle and an environment, living environment that doesn't exist anywhere else. And we had to have numbers to back that up to think we could do that. So we came with a very detailed financial plan to them. With them, we had institutional support. So we got all of the key constituents on board before we went and worked. Had hundreds of meetings literally with different constituencies, both internally and externally from the University of Utah. So we built the support. And then finally, we started a campaign, a grassroots campaign to fill up the building. So we wanted to make sure that we started marketing the building 3 months in advance, and we really put together a campaign around that and started pre-marketing to make sure that we were successful. We didn't leave anything to chance. So those were our kind of metrics and keys to success. And then finally, why were we successful in the University of Utah, and why were we successful in a big organization? And fortunately, when I was recruited up to the University of Utah by Jack Britton, who was the dean at the time, he gave me a book and said, read this book, and it's called Orbiting the Giant Hairball. Has anybody read that book? There you go, right? It's a fantastic book, isn't it? And so I had read that way before this, and I went back and read it again, right? And this book is about a guy who's at Hallmark Cards, and he talks about how the Hairball is the corporate organization, and it's this, bureaucracy and legacy and institutions and other competing interests, and good ideas get tangled up in the Hairball and they die. And what you got to do is you got to get outside of the Hairball and orbit it, but you got to use the gravity and the force of the Hairball to your advantage, right? So I thought about that as the university is the Hairball. So the first thing I think why we were successful in the university is we were credible within the university. We'd already had a track record. People knew us. We played well with other people in the university. We'd always reached out. We'd engaged other part of the campus. So people knew us. They respected us. But we were also viewed as insiders. We weren't viewed as the gunslingers or the outsiders saying, we're going to come in and change the organization because everything you're doing is wrong. We were the insiders that we were known and we had credibility. Second, it was our space. We weren't stepping on anybody else's turf, right? So we kept in our lane. We were respectful of everything, and we said to them, how are we going to make sure you're successful with us, right? And that final piece is that we absorbed the risk. So we took all the financial risk, but we shared the success. So we told everybody, we engaged all of the people, both our leadership and the other colleges, this is how we're going to help you be successful, but we took all of the risk. We knew that that was important to the university, and that was part of the financial model, was we created something that was de-risking for the university that allowed everybody to say yes and get involved with us. So those were the kind of things that we did around innovation that have been successful for us. Since that time, I've also, my donor, who is a very great guy, Pierre Lassonde. So about 3 years into the Lassonde Studios, we'd had this great success. He goes, it's really great, Troy, but I'm 70 years old. What's the next thing you're going to do, right? He challenged me to come up with another innovation. So we've started another program, really new, called the Master of Business Creation degree. We're in our 3rd year of that. Think about Y Combinator meets an academic degree. It's having great success. We were recognized by the AACSB, which is the International Accrediting Body for Business Schools, as the most innovative master's program. So we've got some recognition there. And now I have somebody who was the dean of the University of Business School, who's now the president of the university, and said, Troy, what are you going to do to make the University of Utah even better? So he's challenged me to innovate next. So I went from, I feel like I'm conversant now in innovation, that I've done it enough times, but I feel like I'm not an expert in it yet. So I don't know what I've done could ever be translated into any other location or anything. I think that's one thing that's very different about it, but very unique. And since I'm at the university and a faculty member as well, I'm going to give everybody a homework assignment. So this last year, that's what we do, right? This last year, COVID has forced us all to think about things differently and innovate and change. I would recommend to you, if you haven't already, to take something you've innovated in your organization and what you've done, maybe in your personal life or your business, wherever, and step back and think, how did that innovation work or didn't work, right? We know what motivated it, but really kind of break it down and say, why did that innovation work or not work in my organization, and learn from that. Not sure that it's ever replicable, but you do kind of start building muscle memory around those things. So thank you very much. I'm Troy D'Ambrosia. It's been a pleasure to be with you this afternoon.